Flash Player made the internet, nay, the world, what it is today. Nay? Back in the day, the World Wide Web was slow and annoying. You see, pictures are made of tiny coloured boxes which combine to form the image. You can think of these boxes as picture elements or pixels. Oh! And you needed to download thousands or even millions of them for every image you wanted to see. On dial-up internet, this sucked. It takes a lot of pixels to do basically anything. Hi, I'm an image file. There's hundreds of white dots here, here. But then something happened. Hi, I'm Flash. There's a line from here to here. It's a thickness of 12, and it's white. Oh, and while I'm here, let me take out this rubbish for you. Please don't kill me. I have a wife and children. They're next. Instead of pixels, Flash uses vectors, which are better because they're made of maths. It defined coordinates in space and the lines connecting those points, the size, curvature, and color of those lines, if shapes are filled with anything, and so on, using just a sniffle of bits. It didn't worry about individual pixels, it just told the computer where to draw the lines. But Flash didn't just draw, it could animate images over numerous frames. You could make buttons and program them to do stuff, or react to key presses. And that meant you could make games with it. All this in files small enough to reasonably download in an era where videos were out of the question. This 25-second long classic 240p Eddsworld animation on YouTube is incredibly low quality to save space, but it's still 1.6 megabytes, which would have taken almost 4 minutes to download with dial-up internet. The video would keep pausing to buffer the next little bit. The original Flash version took just 15 seconds to download because the whole thing is under 112 kilobytes. Since it's 25 seconds long, it played smoothly because it loaded faster than it took to watch. And because vectors are just better than pixels, the Flash version's resolution is 1,000,000 times higher. Look at that, look how crisp it is. So for obvious reasons, Flash Player, the program that let web browsers display Flash content, formed the backbone of much of the web for the 2000s. And soon it would be installed, according to some figures, on 99% of computers with internet access. Thousands of websites used Flash elements as part of their layouts, or as the whole site, or even just to make nice buttons, and yet more became places to showcase animations and games people made with it. Many creators' careers started from being discovered in places like this, and many, many more started after being inspired by them. Animators, artists, and game designers the world over can point to Flash as the thing that got them started. Almost every Facebook game and tens of thousands of phone apps were built with this technology. It was even used by some railroads in China to run the trains. That's an anecdotal story it would take effort to verify, and I'm not going to because it might be wrong and I'd want to believe it. Even when the internet got faster and downloading regular video wasn't so bad anymore, Flash's versatility and mass adoption cemented it as the ideal technology for watching them. In 2005, 3 guys started YouTube.com, a site for hosting and playing videos, and to do this, it used Flash Player. YouTube might not have grown the same way, might have taken a very different course, might never have become what it is right now if the ideal technology hadn't been sitting right there on everyone's computers already. For a decade, Flash Player ran the internet, nay the world. And then Adobe killed it. In July 2017, Adobe informed users it would be discontinuing support for Adobe Flash Player at the end of 2020. Afterwards, it would no longer be updated or available to download. On top of that, the latest updates to Flash Player put a kill switch in it. The app was programmed to stop working after January the 12th, 2021, whether you liked it or not. Flash Player wasn't going to die slowly from obsolescence or loss of interest or lack of support. They were killing it. This announcement gave the entire internet, and some Chinese railroads maybe, 3 years to stop using Flash and switch to something else like HTML5, as YouTube did, or in the case of sites which couldn't easily convert, 3 years to kiss their ass goodbye. In January 2021, many websites became unusable ghost towns overnight. Purveyors of content Adobe has decided you can't see anymore. All the skills you learned for making Flashes, like completely random example, the only programming language you ever learned was Flash's ActionScript, which isn't used by anything else, are now worthless. And yes, allegedly some railroads broke down for a day until they switched to an older Flash Player without the automatic shutdown in it. Flash the animation program still exists, renamed Adobe Animate and given next to no support. The thing it primarily exports to doesn't work, features keep breaking with successive updates, and its use in animation and other professional industries is dwindling. It shambles on, a zombie of itself, robbed of its place in history, and even its own name. To be fair, there were a few good reasons to murder Flash so brutally. Being as versatile and feature-rich as it was, that meant bad actors had more places to find security vulnerabilities, and whenever one of those got fixed, there was always another. The phrase zero-day Flash exploit was shockingly common in mid-2000s tech journalism. If Adobe had simply given up and stopped plugging the holes, they'd be putting users at risk. Officially executing it and making it unusable was the safe way of ending support. And they saved a whole bunch of money not having to update it anymore. Sure, it obliterated a ton of people's livelihoods, but that's a sacrifice Adobe was willing to make. The program had a bad reputation in some parts of the tech world, don't get me wrong. There were some good arguments for the sun to go down on Flash Player. But even so, Flash raised me, and a corporation had the power to just kill my dad. Adobe didn't even make Flash, they acquired it when they bought Macromedia in 2005, making this a classic example of a great invention being bought and then slaughtered by businessmen when it stopped being convenient, regardless how many people used it or wanted it around. It was a move which demonstrated how much power a small handful of companies have over the tools we use to make art, make a living, and just generally live our lives. Did you think you lived in a democracy? You idiot? You worm? That doesn't generate money for shareholders. There are higher principles at play here than making the world a better place for humans to live in. You can't even measure joy. There is no immortal soul, but there is a god and his name is NASDAQ. A few years ago, I got tricked into running a grants program. I know, it happens to all of us sometimes. I was about 2 hours late to a meeting between my producer Kat and award-winning cartoonist Angie Wang, and in my absence they decided to set up the Brain Mind Residency, where we give a bunch of money to young creatives and see what they come up with. And by we, I mean they did that, but it was my money. Some really cool stuff came out of it. I should probably finish the video about that instead of getting distracted by video game sound effects and whatever the hell this is. But one thing that really stuck out to me during this process was how so many of these original artists with their unique ideas still found themselves relying on tools which could be changed without notice, thrown in the trash, or just made infinitely more expensive by the mega corporations that control them. It's their world now. We just live in it. Fools like me the world over use Adobe software to do their work and express themselves creatively. I'm using Adobe Premiere right now and I hate it. Every update doesn't fix any of the problems, but it breaks something I liked. An entire panel disappeared recently. Essential graphics is gone. It was literally essential and they killed him. I use this tool to work on videos that I occasionally bother to finish and release. You can't just fucking change it on me. Oh, but we put the same properties somewhere else that's worse. We streamlined it. I'm gonna streamline my brain against the fucking pavement. As time goes on, the relationship between these products' users and their owners has become increasingly antagonistic. I don't feel like a customer, I feel like a hostage. I'm not even allowed to buy the tools I use, and that's really gonna suck when they discontinue one again. More so than ever before in history, it is obvious the goal of these companies is not to make anything good, it is to make money. Most of the tools people use to actually create something are in the hands of big corporate entities like Adobe, Apple, Autodesk, Maxon, Microsoft, or Google. They've inserted themselves so deeply into the fabric of society it's almost impossible not to encounter them, and yet none of them represent the interests of their users. That's not what they're for. The shareholders don't care about the essential graphics panel. They care about quarterly reports with AI innovation used every other sentence. Maybe innovate yourself a thesaurus next time. But it doesn't have to be this way. There's a reason why this was allowed to happen. There was a mechanism that caused this to happen. And that means there must be a way of undoing it before it's too late, right? So today, in this Cosmic Cycle's laughable excuse for a think piece, we'll be exploring how and why corporations were allowed to become so powerful, identify the man responsible. It's not Reagan this time, I promise! It's one of his friends. Get distracted for months by side stories that turn out not to be relevant and hundreds of years of legal documentation. Wonder if anyone will even remember you exist by the time you're done. And along the way, try and figure out how to fix the modern digital creative landscape. Ooh, H-Bomb, I love your videos even when I'm not interested in the topic. I'd watch anything you made. Well, here's a video about software. Consider this your final test. What did the AI say I say again? Oh yeah, buckle up! Bom, 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 bom. Part 1. Advert Tutorials. Tutorials are just the best, aren't they? If you want to do anything with anything, you can type it in a search and find a website or video or forum where someone else is ready to tell you how. Tutorials epitomize what the internet can be, a place where people can share knowledge and ideas and learn from each other. So many people owe Andrew Kramer their livelihoods, it's unreal. There are other people on the same path as you who are happy to give up their free time to create something helpful for you. This is the future we were promised, and it's a better world than we deserve. We don't deserve you, Andrew Kramer. I'm sorry, Andrew. I have to do this. But tutorials are also sort of advertisements, aren't they? If I want to know how to shoot a 3D bullet across the screen, like in this iconic Andy Cramey tutorial, one key thing I'm learning is which expensive softwares I should purchase to do so. I use the software I do today because when I wanted to screen my stop-motion animations in my high school assembly and Windows Movie Maker could barely handle it, the internet told me a better way was Adobe Premiere Pro. And in late high school, when I saw Twin Peaks and decided to make a fake video blog where I murdered myself and put the video on USB sticks left lying around the school to imply I'd been killed and replaced with a doppelganger, yeah, I've always been like this. You bet Andy had a tutorial just waiting to sell me on Adobe After Effects. Tutorials are organic, grassroots advertising. It's an almost inherent extension of teaching someone something they want to learn, and that's fine. But then the megacorps found out. At some point, companies like Adobe realized how valuable tutorials were for spreading their brand and decided to get in on the action. Why let your users make passive commercials when you can make active commercials? So now Adobe has a whole suite of official YouTube channels making tutorials, in quotes. Well, partial quotes. Some of them do feature genuine professionals teaching people how to use their software, but a lot of them... This video is presented and edited like a friendly vlog by two creators just hanging out together, and it calls itself a tutorial, but when the video is done acting casual and establishing that we're all friends and we're about to learn something, it gets weird. It's supposed to be teaching you color correction techniques. That's what the title promises, right? But it doesn't. You don't learn anything because it's actually a commercial. When this came out, Premiere had recently added a new button which tries to match the colors between two shots for you. This video was made to advertise that feature. The hosts press the button and marvel at the results.
Yeah, that's tight.
So now that will automatically match that.
That's cool.
And that's it. That's the color correction tutorial. Hey, Adobe Premiere is so cool, guys. You should buy Adobe software. And there's a few other tips, like pay Adobe for stock footage. This kind of bait and switch marketing aimed directly at people just trying to learn how to do something is incredibly scummy. Like, people who want to know how to color correct their vlogs are going to type that in a search and get shown this tutorial with a promising looking thumbnail of the color wheels they probably want to learn about in it. But if they click it, surprise, it's a commercial for a button and you never learn how to use those wheels. You don't even learn how to use the button. It's slightly more complicated than they show in the video, but showing a real tutorial wouldn't make for good advertising, so it got edited down into the check out this button show.
That's cool.
Then it was cut down even further and uploaded as a YouTube short.
That's cool.
In this version, the button works like magic, and the comments are people complaining it didn't show them what to do and it doesn't work that way. Oh, you thought you were gonna learn something? Oh, here's a tip for you. Buy Adobe stock footage, asshole. Adobe figured out a lot of people learn what software to use from tutorials, so they started making advertising shaped like tutorials. Rich corporations are invading the sacred communal space of the tutorial. The search for learning and honesty is now met with direct advertising. But if you don't want to see an Adobe commercial, just don't click on the videos made by Adobe, right? Wrong. They're everywhere. Adobe pays tons of creators to make promotional material aimed at their own audiences. When you see one of these in your feed, it looks like an independent creator showing you something cool. It's only when you open it you discover you just got served a paid ad like it was a regular video. There's a real how do you do fellow kids energy to it. They're trying not to feel like an ad, and this even permeates the language they make people use. Sure, you legally have to tell YouTube it's paid so they officially disclose it, but their creators don't say this video was sponsored by Adobe, they say
this video is in partnership with Adobe.
See, if they said sponsored, people would realize it's an ad and move on. People generally skip ads when they know it's an ad, you know? But partnered? That sounds kind of nice. Like a collaboration between your friendly neighborhood TikToker and their pal, the billion-dollar corporation. Partnership sounds almost authentic until you hear it 100 more times.
This is a partnership with Adobe.
I'm teaming up with Adobe.
Partnering with Adobe.
And I'm excited to partner with Adobe.
Through my partnership with Adobe.
I've teamed up with Adobe.
I teamed up with Adobe.
Thanks to my partnership with Adobe.
We partnered up with Adobe.
I've partnered up with Adobe.
I've partnered up with Adobe. In partnership with Adobe.
In partnership with Adobe.
In partnership with Adobe.
In partnership with Adobe.
I've partnered with Adobe.
I partnered with Adobe.
I partnered with Adobe.
I'm partnering with Adobe.
I'm partnering with Adobe.
I'm partnering with Adobe.
I'm partnering with Adobe.
partnering with Adobe again.
If you want to find out how to do anything creative on YouTube now, your search will drown you in an ocean of Adobe partners trying to sell you Adobe software. Even the videos that really do teach you how to use the software serve an insidious purpose. Now people are being served Adobe-approved tutorials for Adobe software instead of videos from unbiased sources, which might have recommended their competition. To fully cement their takeover of this platform, they've turned their attention to some of the original trusted creators of tutorials. Film Riot is a channel with a long legacy of really good filmmaking tutorials, covering myriad aspects of the process: camera work, how to make your own equipment on a budget, how to use various softwares, often Adobe but not always.
Now as you can see, we're using Final Cut Pro, but almost all editing suites have these same functions.
And they made a ton of short films showing what executing on all these ideas looks like. Its main host, Ryan Connolly, has been doing it for yonks now. It's been hugely influential to a lot of people, myself included, and some of these videos are like 15 years old. That's absurd. I just realized I've been watching this guy since I was a teenager. Wow. It's hard to overstate the effect this channel has had on getting people into filmmaking as a craft, and that's a reputation money can't buy. Except Adobe did buy it. As what we call a legacy channel, they're not exactly raking in the views lately. Ryan and the other creators are grown men now, and probably have mouths to feed. They've taken on sponsorships increasingly often to sustain themselves financially, and one of their main sponsors has been the Adobe Corporation. Ryan makes some of the official tutorials for the Adobe channels, and puts in appearances in the advertisements, and Film Riot's videos are also frequently sponsored by Adobe. Well, they don't say sponsored, obviously.
Today's episode is in partnership with Adobe, but as I say every time, if we don't really love it, we don't partner. Very good. Moving on.
Like, sure, I'm taking a company's money to make this video you're watching, but I really do love the company, so I'm not really selling out. If anything, I'm selling in. Actually, speaking of disclosure, Ryan's so heavily embedded with Adobe that sometimes I think he forgets to mention they're the sponsor. Here's a recent video of theirs. Insane updates for Adobe Premiere and After Effects. It's 9 minutes telling you what was in the latest updates for Premiere and After Effects. The new visual intelligence panel, integration with Frame.io, the caption translation, improved caching for longer playback? This is just a sizzle reel for Adobe investors. A layperson might think a creator they like is genuinely so excited for these updates they just had to make a video about it. But if you click the links at the top of the description to the wonderful Adobe products they're hyping up, you get taken to a URL with paid influencer in it. This is a 9-minute long undisclosed advertisement on the Film Riot YouTube channel. If a video contains even a whiff of sponsorship, you have to tell YouTube about it so viewers are appropriately informed. This video by a paid influencer dedicated to advertising Adobe's latest patch notes somehow wasn't marked as paid promotion? Are you kidding me? This is honestly super disappointing. Sponsorships are a complicated question. Do they dilute a video's message? Do they morally compromise the creator? Is it bad to be sponsored by a war crime factory? Whatever your opinion is on YouTubers doing sponsorships, you're correct and I agree with you, so we don't have to get into it right now. But you should at least say that a video is sponsored by someone, right? Then again, the functionality to say a video contains a paid promotion was only added a few years ago, and Film Riot are a really old channel. They might not have noticed that had been added and they just carried on and didn't notice it. And, to be fair, I forgot about it too. When I pulled up my climate change video with the sponsorship in it to get that example footage, I discovered that after YouTube rolled out that feature, I never went back and ticked the box to say it was a paid promotion. That footage of me ticking the box wasn't staged. That was me actually ticking it right now. The video said it had a sponsorship in it, so it's not like I failed to disclose, but still, nobody's perfect. So if anyone from Film Riot is watching this, no biggie, but you should probably start ticking that box. If you're making money from Adobe for these videos in some form or another, your audience deserves to know that's the relationship they're dealing with going into the video. Thanks guys. Sorry to bother you. I'm a huge fan. I feel really bad bringing this up, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Adobe's choice to I almost said sponsor, partner with Film Riot is especially clever though, because they're a channel dedicated to filmmaking. If they sponsored some other random channel, like a cooking show or something, people would know it's just an ad and sort of tune it out a little bit, you know? You take ads with a grain of salt. But this type of endorsement is a little insidious. It carries a lot more weight. If the pro tutorial guys are taking Adobe's money, they must be the best. Ryan is what marketing people call a KOL, or Key Opinion Leader. Film Riot has over a decade of good goodwill built up. People see them as a resource for learning about filmmaking and editing. So when they do a sponsorship for Adobe, even pausing to say they really love it, this comes off as a serious endorsement backed by years of expertise. By getting him to say what they want him to say, Adobe are exerting a lot more influence over audiences than your average sponsorship. People coming to this channel are not going to be able to distinguish honest recommendation from paid advertising, especially when they forget to disclose they're advertising anything. All kinds of problems arise when you cross the streams like this. What was that? History is littered with examples of what happens when people are heavily sponsored by the industry they cover. Back when games journalism existed, companies like GameSpot covered games and made their money from running advertising on their website. But then some idiot thought, hey, we should do ads for games. That's why people are here, right? That's just good integration. Except now you're paid to advertise the things you talk about. There's a bit of a conflict of interest there. This came to a head when their editorial director gave a game a 6 out of 10 and they fucking fired him because that game's ads were plastered everywhere on the site. When someone is taking money from an organization, there's a strong incentive to keep that relationship friendly. You can't exactly shit talk your sponsor and expect them to keep paying you. So one of the companies Ryan talks about and is supposed to be impartial about is paying his bills now? This puts a lot of pressure on Ryan to keep that money coming in, and has a chilling effect on the content of the channel, and his ability to speak openly about the topics he covers. I want to just be happy for Ryan that he's getting paid back for all those years making real tutorials for people like me. The homemade dolly I made thanks to one of his videos opened my eyes to what I could achieve on no budget, even if it immediately collapsed and nearly killed my friend Greg when he tried to use it as a skateboard. Surely he deserves a little selling out, as a treat. But I can't help but think about how much sponsorships have transformed the entire Film Riot project. They used to teach filmmaking to people who were young and still learning and had very little money to spend. This recent video is about how to build a hospital set on an ultra-low budget, like under $150. That sounds great. The comments love the fact it's a video actually teaching something interesting and not just ad copy for whatever new features have just come to After Effects disguised as a tutorial. It's something you can physically do. I like it. Halfway through, they stop everything to do an ad for the lights they're using, which are this video's sponsor.
Before we get into that, let's talk about these lights. Aperture makes some of the best lights out there.
Those lights are linked in the description, and these cost 2,500 American pounds. They weren't counting the filmmaking gear they already had or got free from the sponsor in the cost of the build. This low-budget filmmaking tutorial assumes it's low budget because you already spent all your money on lights. In a classic Film Riot tutorial, they would talk about how to be creative with lighting on such a small budget, and the viewer could get inspired by those possibilities. In 2025, filmmaking is for rich people again. I think partnering with all these companies goes against the original intent of Film Riot. It's indie spirit if you want to be that way about it. And regrettably, I do. I don't blame them for doing it though. YouTube is a financially unstable thing to do for a living. Many creators struggle to stay afloat. I'm not mad at Film Riot. I'm mad at YouTube for being so precarious it pushes people into becoming effectively spokespeople for corporations to keep the lights on. At least these guys got a few actual lights out of it. But I don't know if seeing tutorials like this would have inspired me as a kid. I grew up watching tutorials about how to make your own lights. There's some kind of symbolism there. It made me feel like I could do anything if I was willing to put in the work. I didn't need thousands of dollars to make something I was happy with. If I was a kid now, growing up with these tutorials, I probably would have just become a fucking dentist. No offense to dentists, but you get it. And that's what's really important here. The tutorials are suffering, damn it. Won't someone please think of the tutorials? Seriously though, for real, that's my actual opinion. Tutorials are precious and Adobe are killing them. These are the places future generations find out what's possible, learn new things, open themselves up to whole new worlds of creativity. When the goal of these videos becomes selling something, all of that goes out the window. Some of these fake Adobe tutorials stick out as having some truly fascinating things to teach, but they can't because the focus is on promoting features. This video with the color matching tool is part of a series. The host is Pedro Flores, a creator whose stuff has gone viral on numerous platforms over the years. In this series, he hangs out with another creator and they and his crew make something together and then show how they made it. That's the premise anyway, but like I said, what actually happens is it becomes an ad. Check this one. Pedro and his crew and his friend Eric Ochoa went out to an old Wild West themed location and shot a whole comedy short there. So much goes into shooting on a location: prep work, moving equipment to and fro, directing people, getting the right shots so you can do the effects properly later. A making of for this 5-minute minute short would actually be super informative and interesting. I'd eat that shit up. But the video was really about the new slider in Premiere that does audio noise reduction. That's it. That's not even a new feature. That's been an effect in Premiere forever, and every other audio and video editing program for that matter. But now it's a slider, and it's part of the new Essential Sound panel to put everything soundy in one convenient place. It's so simple and streamlined, sitting right next to the Essential Graphics panel that's already been fucking deleted since this tutorial came out. So don't get used to any of this shit. It might be gone next week. We like to keep users on their toes here at the Adobe Corporation. Adobe. Duck. I'm genuinely frustrated how much clearly went into making this that we didn't get to see because the video had to be a commercial for a slider, and not even the fun kind. Slider is an American word for small hamburger. They sneak in a little bit of stuff about them messing around on location to create fun sound effects for the short, and I love that stuff, it's really informative. But the short was literally a silent movie spoof. The sound effects and audio are a tiny fraction of what went into their project, which is also why it's a terrible commercial for a noise reduction slider. This short is pretty funny in places, in some genuinely psychotic ways I love. Like they cut to stock footage that's clearly not theirs for their reaction shots. I don't know why that gets me. They edit the goat so it's waving back at them. Everything's moving in slightly fast forward to emulate old-timey film footage, but they exaggerate it to make it look super bizarre sometimes. Sometimes they're actually walking funny to make it even stranger. They're riffing on silent movies so none of the characters talk, but they added a ton of over-the-top sound effects anyway, which is so inexplicable that it's like really funny. Eric and Pedro bark like dogs half the time. There's a bit where Eric throws his drink away and puts the cup down, but the liquid moves in slow motion and lands in the cup for some reason, and it goes by so fast you might miss it. It's so wacky and weird, and I would have killed to see all the thinking that went into making this. Even the bits they shot just for the tutorial reek of mystery. Did they use a drone for this bit at the beginning, or is there a building across the street? We'll never know. Like, we know there's behind-the-scenes footage of them making this short. There's a dedicated BTS guy in the credits. They show a few scant shots at the beginning to make you think, oh, maybe you're gonna find out how they did this stuff. Maybe they'll show why they shot the green screen stuff physically there on location and teach you about the importance of shooting green screened elements in the actual setting so the lighting matches up. But they weren't allowed to do that because it's a commercial for a noise removal slider. I hate this. I'm so mad. I really wanted to know how this video was made, and now short of figuring out where they shot this and going there myself, I'll never know. So I'm here now. First off, I don't know how anyone does anything in this heat. It is so much warmer than Britain. Ah, you figured it out. It's the green screen reveal again. Ah, you got me. You got it all figured out. So that's it, huh? You think you know me? Huh? You think you got me all figured out? Huh? You don't know me! We are not friends! I will fucking kill you! Old West Temecula is a bed and breakfast in Temecula, California. A beautiful 3-bedroom ranch home which somewhat inexplicably has an entire old western town attached to it. Apparently it was featured in Forbes as one of the best vacation rentals in California. I also have been dubiously written about in Forbes, so it's a perfect match. And for the record, they did use a drone for this shot. There's nothing over there. Maybe they used a big crane, I don't know, probably not. I'm glad I got to solve that minor mystery for myself. I had to buy a drone for this bit. Overall, today has been probably the most expensive day of my life. And now Kat has to land that thing successfully or she's fired.
Oops. Sorry, wrong direction.
All right, yeah, fuck! Jesus! At the time of writing, this place, which can house up to 10 guests at a time, goes for roughly $810 a night, which isn't a lot if you can find 9 friends to split that with you. Imagine having 9 friends, though. My intern Rachel's new contract obliges me to inform you we are not friends, and she gets her own craft services table. Do you even eat? Can you eat? There's so much stuff here. It's so spacious. This is a fantastic destination at a shockingly reasonable price. But when you think about how much fucking money Adobe makes, why are their creators making their advertising resorting to such small-scale expenses as a moderately priced bed and breakfast? Adobe's budget should not be roughly analogous to my budget. I'm extremely mad how much money people give Adobe. People like me give Adobe, only for it all to go into the pockets of shareholders and not to anyone who actually works for a living. Adobe expect their subjects to literally dance for pennies in the desert. Adobe saw the beautiful, independent tutorial ecosystem, people teaching each other creative development and learning new things, and turned it into one big commercial for their software. By buying up all the KOLs and strategically throwing small amounts of money at anyone who will take it, they've put themselves front and center in every conversation about how to make art. But having said all of that, I have to admit, none of this is particularly unique to Adobe. This is just how companies get their footing in conversations on the internet, by buying space in it, setting up their lemonade stand in the marketplace of ideas. When someone starts showing signs of being a KOL, Raid Shadow Legends sends them an email. We've all got one. It's a rite of passage, a badge of honor. The advertising gods have deemed you worthy of shilling hot garbage. Spending money to gain market dominance and make more money is an age-old tradition. In fact, the rich having the most power to get richer is one of the key weaknesses of free market capitalism, one which has only got worse in recent years. To find out what's really happening here, and how Adobe is so successfully exploiting it, we need to go back to where this video should have started, the beginning. What am I even doing here? This whole chapter was tangential at best, and now I'm stuck in fucking Temecula. We need to redo the whole fucking video. Okay, pretend none of this happened. Part 1. Again. How we got into this mess. In 1982, in a humble garage in Los Altos, California, two former Xerox computer scientists were starting a new company. But we need a name! Hey John, your house is right next to the Adobe Creek. That's perfect, Charles! We'll call it Creek! Do I get a say in that? In 1984, computer printing was a nightmare. Every printer worked differently and needed different programs and commands and files and inputs to work. Then Adobe released PostScript, which standardized computer printing and made everything way more convenient.
Wouldn't it be a lot easier if we just standardized on PostScript?
By 1987, hundreds of programs and dozens of printer and other tech companies, including Apple, were licensing Adobe's technology. To enable printing in different fonts, Adobe had to actually design and make them first. 1001freefonts.com hadn't been invented yet, so to help make them, the company developed a graphic design program. This program was too useful not to monetize, and in 1987 it went on sale as Adobe Illustrator and became an immensely popular graphic design tool still used today to make all the nice text and logos you see everywhere. And then blah blah blah, blah blah, they did more stuff. Oh, Jesus Christ, it's so hot. Oh fuck me. But in the late 80s, Adobe stopped being a company that made products and became something else. Let's play a game. Whew. Okay, I'm gonna name an Adobe software, and you tell me whether it was actually made by Adobe. Flash? Well, that was an easy one. I already told you about Macromedia. What's next? After Effects, their special effects and motion graphics program that works great as long as you're using it exactly how it was intended. Nope, that was actually made by another company they bought. Audition? Their audio editor? Nope. Cool Edit Pro, that was his name, Cool Edit Pro, was a really well-liked audio editor Adobe bought in 2003 and re-released with no changes except the Adobe name was on it and the price was raised by $50. I mean, you gotta make your money back somehow. I'm beginning to think the cowboys of the Old West didn't get their clothes at Spirit of Halloween. And speaking of which, this outfit was very underwhelming. It didn't come with a yellow shirt, and I don't have a yellow shirt on me. Who owns a yellow shirt? Photoshop? Photoshop! It's so universal it's a fucking verb. At least Adobe made that one, right? No, they were just the distributor. Eventually, they just bought the rights off the actual creators in 1995. Adobe is big enough at this point that making software is optional. Adobe primarily owns software. They're less of a creative company and more a gatekeeper of creative companies they bought. They made some printers work in the 80s and a decent Illustrator, and then used that success to just take everything else, and now they run everything. This is the main method Adobe used to conquer the software landscape, by buying all of them so they become the landscape. That doesn't sound too complicated, but the rest of the video is about this, so I hope it is. Let's find out! Part 2. Acquisitions Incorporated. H-Bomb, is that a reference to what I think it is? No, I just used those words in that order for no reason. Frame Technology developed a program called FrameMaker, which specialized in producing complex documents like technical manuals. This made it something of a rival to Adobe's Acrobat. So Adobe bought Frame and kept selling it as Adobe FrameMaker. Adobe made sure it dominated its chosen markets one way or the other. This was the beginning of a trend. All of Adobe's early purchases were focused on eliminating their competition by turning them into more Adobe.
A much bigger competitor was Aldus. Aldus's PageMaker was another publishing program which rivaled Acrobat and FrameMaker.
PageMaker could make the laser writer sing, so I liked it. That was all it really took to make me fall in love with it.
Aldus was the other big company making printing good at the time, and that made them a threat. Aldus also produced another dangerously useful piece of software called PhotoStyler, which competed directly with the Photoshop Adobe was currently distributing and planning on buying, along with Freehand, a vector drawing software which went toe-to-toe with Illustrator. Aldus was a meaningful alternative to Adobe. The two competed heavily throughout the 80s and 90s, with Illustrator and Freehand the biggest design applications of their kind in the market. Consumers benefited from this rivalry, as the two companies had to fight on price and features the way they wouldn't if they were the only option. But improving a product to win customers isn't how big business does things, and there was a much easier solution. In 1994, Adobe bought Aldus. Aldus PageMaker became Adobe PageMaker, Aldus Freehand became Adobe Freehand, Aldus After Effects became Adobe After Effects, see I told you, and Aldus PhotoStyler got thrown in the fucking bin. You might notice that means there were 3 very similar programs all owned by Adobe, and yes, for a period, Adobe sold all 3 of them. They're all a little bit different, sure. Someone in the comments is like, they technically do different things, but no company would do this on purpose. This is just a side effect of eating so much of your competition. Users heavily embedded in the Adobe ecosystem start to notice little annoying things, like how resizing in one app works completely differently from resizing in another, or several apps have the exact same effects, like motion blur, but they don't do exactly the same thing. The effect is different because they were coded differently. And the effects don't even have the same names across apps, so you can never know what's going to happen when you try to do the same thing in 2 tools made by the same company. This is because they were really made by different companies, and these discrepancies were left unresolved for decades because Adobe doesn't make software. Adobe buys software and sells it for more money with their logo on it. Adobe have bought so many companies, there's a dedicated Wikipedia page for it. They've bought multiple companies called FrameMaker, more like Frame Purchaser. Adobe acquired so many companies that several people have got acquired by Adobe on their resume more than once. Kevin Lynch was a Mac software developer who helped on the first Mac release of FrameMaker, who then got acquired by Adobe. Then he went to work at Macromedia, which Adobe then also acquired. Kevin eventually wound up Adobe's CTO. Maybe they just really wanted Kevin this whole time. If you're not Kevin, though, things don't end quite as well for the employees of companies Adobe buys. When Adobe acquired Macromedia, they were shockingly open they were going to start laying people off immediately. Companies don't normally come out and say it like that. Those are the people who made the company successful and worth buying. What are you doing? 10 days after the acquisition, they intended to cut up to 700 jobs. Around the time of the merger, Macromedia had about 1,400 employees, so half of Macromedia's worth of people were laid off. Some of those would have been from Adobe's side, but that's a ton of the folks who made Macromedia's software work disappearing in a short time span. Entire teams relevant to Flash's success and continued development were just completely destroyed overnight. And this might be a surprise, but firing half the folks who make a product impacts its quality. Flash started dying here, when suddenly after its acquisition, its development all but halted. Flash had problems with working on smartphones, which in the mid-2000s was starting to be a problem. The team recommended rewriting the program to benefit from this growing platform, but Adobe turned them down to save money. Flash's programming language, ActionScript, was not meaningfully updated in the 15 years after they bought it. A big update that was being worked on before the acquisition got finished, and then it stagnated for a decade and a half, the software industry equivalent of a quadrillion lifetimes. As time went on, Flash became increasingly inefficient looking. It ran on the CPU, a mistake in retrospect when GPUs became much more powerful over the 2000s, and it only ran on one CPU core, so it couldn't benefit from multi-core CPUs either. These were all valid criticisms of Flash, but they were not unsolvable. Adobe had the money and resources to fix these issues, but it was slightly cheaper to let it die slowly than to spend the money making it work. And fixing it probably got harder after they fired all those people. Companies really do this. They buy a popular software so they can be the ones who make the money selling it, and then they fire the people who make it and destroy its future in the name of cutting costs. In 2006, the tech company Avid purchased Sibelius, one of the top musical score writing programs. And then they fired the entire team and closed their office. They still sold Sibelius for your human money, they just weren't going to develop it or fix bugs anymore. This caused, to put it lightly, a storm of piss. Every composer in the world started throwing bricks at Avid shareholders. They were firing them out of cannons into walls made from the bricks. It was a real mess. With total societal collapse imminent, Avid announced they were going to support Sibelius again and started hiring a new team. in Ukraine so they could pay them less. The new team had trouble maintaining software written by a specialized group who weren't around to explain how it worked anymore, so Avid gave up and tried again with a second new team in Montreal. I wonder why tech companies go to Montreal so often. I guess they've made slightly more progress, but Sibelius hasn't been the same since Avid defenestrated everyone who knew how it worked. Another once beloved Avid software was Softimage, one of the big 3D graphics programs of the 2000s and early 2010s, which it bought from Microsoft in the 90s. It was a big deal. They made the Lego movie with it. But selling and supporting software is for suckers. We don't want reliable income making something people like. We want to impress shareholders right now. So they sold it to rival 3D software manufacturer Autodesk in 2008. When a big sale like this happens, everyone holds their breath and waits to see if the app they use to make a living gets killed to save its new owners money. Autodesk already had Maya and 3ds Max, which they had also previously bought. They didn't need a third software. They just wanted to erase the other big competitor. It was only a matter of time until... Wow, 7 years, that's not that bad. That's longer than Sibelius got. Probably would have lasted less time at Avid. So companies keep absorbing other companies and products, even though they don't seem to care about the products themselves and keep destroying them. Companies like Adobe adopted these practices because when all your competition evaporates, something interesting happens. People have to come to you. If you sell food, yes, people need food to live, but they don't need your food, so you have to compete with other food creators on price and quality. But what if you have the only food in town? That's called a captive market. People have no choice but to buy what you're selling. And that means you can charge basically whatever you want and relax the quality control. Yum yum. This strategy of buying everything you can in your field isn't confined to creative software. I'm really just describing how companies work. They're all trying to make themselves unavoidable by consuming everything else in their marketplace. Amazon went public in 1997 as an online bookstore. Within 2 years, it had bought 14 other online stores and quickly became the only store. Facebook got big and bought Instagram to stay big when people started leaving. Mark Zuckerberg was very specific in correspondence that he was buying it to maintain control of the young people moving to the new thing and keep them within the ecosystem he makes money from. We know this because everything Zuckerberg says leaks. To quote the man himself, everything I say leaks. That's from a leaked audio recording. Twitter did the same thing when it bought Vine, and then it destroyed it. Then Twitter itself got bought and destroyed. The circle of life. Google built a website that let you ask where the Beanie Babies are, and now they own half the internet. I mean, they own YouTube, where you're watching this right now, idiot. They're so purchase happy, the entire tech industry shifted, and now the main goal of most tech startups is to get bought by Google. There's a whole sub-economy centered around getting assimilated by the Borg. Google knew video was going to be a big part of the web, that's why they launched Google Video. They technically beat YouTube to market, but YouTube became the platform of choice, and the second they became the obvious winner, Google bought them. Articles about YouTube surpassing Google Video had to get updated with a quick, "Oh, Google just bought them, by the way." These purchases ensure you retain control over your intended field. No one can compete with them because they're too big, and if you try, they'll just buy you. Say you need glasses. Chances are your glasses are made by a company called Luxottica, who own most glasses brands, most glasses stores, and several health insurance companies. This means they can charge extremely high prices for glasses, far more than fair market value, because there are so few available alternatives, and most people need to see. Not me, though, I just guess.
Glasses like these can sell for up to 20 times what they cost to make.
When they bought the Ray-Ban brand off of Bausch & Lomb in 1999, they started selling them for multiple times their original price.
Today, those $29 pairs can cost $150 and more.
You can only get away with this if you own all the other brands around it in the store you also own, so it looks like that's just how much glasses are supposed to cost. This is so obviously messed up that companies take steps to create the illusion of competition anyway. Luxottica don't put their name front and center on all their glasses. They keep all the subsidiaries separated and branded differently to create the illusion of multiple companies fighting to earn your dollar. If Coke bought Pepsi, they wouldn't stop selling Pepsi, they would sell you both. The impression of choice keeps customers guessing, and they'll make money either way. No real choices would be left, except to drink balls. I love balls. That's not an endorsement, I just wanted an excuse to say I love balls. I haven't checked if the Balls Corporation is bad. They probably are, I'm sorry. Many people need certain types of software to make a living. It's a bit further up on the hierarchy of needs than food and sight, but it's a reality of the modern world. All Adobe's purchases ensured users had to come to them and pay their prices. What are you gonna do, use Photo Styler?
"We killed that guy! He's dead! Pony up, buckaroo!" This is another reason why Adobe was very invested in buying Flash, but not that interested in maintaining or updating it. They bought Macromedia to stop a potential competitor taking over their turf. The apps themselves don't matter and are maintained as cheaply as possible or not at all. When Adobe bought Aldus and fired most of the people who knew how their products worked, they accidentally made PageMaker an unusable mess. But that didn't matter, did it? I mean, what choice did consumers have? What are they going to do, buy another app? Well, in this case, yes, actually. Quark, the last remaining competitor in this field, made Quark Express. It quickly won a huge chunk of the market by default, because it was being actively developed and improved on instead of executing its developers to save money. And Adobe couldn't just buy these guys. Quark was so successful there was a period where they tried to buy Adobe. And they couldn't update PageMaker to compete with Express. Everyone who knew how was gone. In the end, they had to abandon PageMaker and start from scratch on a new program, Adobe InDesign. InDesign is successful in its field today, although as an Adobe product it's still slow and bloated, but its very existence is a testament to the foolish corporate culture that smothered its predecessors. If Adobe had their way, they would never have had to make it, and everyone would have been stuck using the outdated, unsupported programs they clawed from the cold, dead hands of their competitors. They were essentially forced to make a half-decent program to defend themselves against competition they couldn't just buy. So there's a lesson here, right? Competition is good. It forces people to make their stuff better. Without competition, they will fire everyone and let their software fester into a buggy mess, since people who work in that field have no choice but to use it anyway. It's bad, then, that every corporation in the world is incentivized to ensure there is no competition. Quark weren't competing so hard for the love of the game. They were trying to buy Adobe themselves, remember? Apparently Steve Jobs tried to buy Adobe as well in the 80s, but they said no, and instead Apple became a major shareholder. I wonder if that'll come up later. What do you think? Yeah, I think it will too. Every company is at any moment either buying someone or being bought by someone, and there's always a bigger fish. Oh no, Blizzard! Oh no, Activision Blizzard! The end result is a small group of powerful corporations controlling the software everyone else needs to use and charging whatever they like, which is great for shareholders. It's bad for humans though. In fact, it's wrong, isn't it? Like, not just morally and ethically, but like, you're not allowed to do that, right? Owning everything in a system so no one can compete? I'm pretty sure that's called a monopoly. Not the game, the actual thing. So, why isn't anyone doing anything? Monopolies are illegal, aren't they? Well, they're theoretically illegal. They used to be actually illegal, but then, Bork. Robert Bork was a Republican law professor who—
Wait, Bork? Like the sound the Swedish chef makes?
No, that's just his name.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna make a Muppet of him.
You're not making a Muppet! Robert Bork was a Republican law professor who came to prominence for his radical reinterpretation of laws put in place to stop monopolies, also known as antitrust law. His book, The Antitrust Paradox, argued antitrust law was holding back growth and efficiency in America. Big government was meddling in free markets where it didn't belong, and monopolies weren't even that bad anyway. At the time, courts proactively tried to stop monopolies forming. When a company tried buying one of its competitors, it was often investigated, and sometimes they were banned from buying them. And sometimes really big, powerful companies got forcibly broken down into smaller ones. This is because when a company gets too big, they can use their sheer scale to undercut their competition, preventing anyone else from succeeding. They can also control the cost of labor in their industry because workers in that field wouldn't have anywhere else to go. And if they got big enough, they could bribe the government, lobby officials, and exert control over democracy. Laws like the Sherman Act were put in place in the late 1800s to hold businesses in check and keep the free market free. But Bork claimed these laws only existed to punish monopolies if they actually did a crime with the power they got. Getting that power was fine. In fact, it was good. That meant more power to innovate with. Companies eating other companies meant they were merging, combining their powers and becoming even more efficient. If all the competition gets folded into one company, that company doesn't have to waste time competing anymore and can focus on delivering better products to its customers. If anything, the lack of competition is proof a company's products are simply too good to compete with. How can they be bad? They won! According to Bork, a company having a lot of power in their market was fine. If they were undercutting the competition, that meant consumers were getting a good deal. And if workers didn't like being underpaid, they were still free to go work somewhere else. Now you might be asking, but won't workers have nowhere else to go if there's only one company in the field they specialize in?
Bork didn't have an answer for that, but he was very sure antitrust was bad for big business, and that was more important. He described an antitrust suit against IBM as an attack on outstanding commercial success. The people with the most money are the good guys, and using the power they rightfully earned to kill their enemies is just the system working the way it's supposed to. In the ideal Bork economy, every market consists of one super company making the best possible product using all the available technology and resources, and selling it for the best possible price. Competition is just a distraction from the purity and profitability of this perfect system. The laws should be used to protect consumers from the bad parts of monopolies, like fixing the price too high when there are no alternatives left, and nothing else. Bork used the phrase consumer welfare to describe the purpose of antitrust laws, and this quickly became the catchphrase of the legislation and court rulings he inspired. This Georgetown Law Journal paper about how to define a monopoly, which is also hosted directly on justice.gov, so it's regarded as a pretty important paper on the topic, uses the phrase 27 times and cites Bork as its originator. Bork spearheaded a shifting of the goalposts of entire branches of legislation. He turned laws meant to stop corporations from becoming too powerful into worthless bits of paper, focused entirely on the consumer experience. To quote political scientist Nicholas Short,
scholars like Robert Bork began to assert companies mostly grew in size to capture efficiency gains that are passed on to consumers in the form of lower prices. And the economic welfare that flows to consumers from these corporate consolidations is the only yardstick by which government officials should determine whether to intervene.
If the products are still relatively fine, and they're not gouging the price too much, who cares if one corporation runs everything? That's just efficiency. Once they start doing horrifically exploitative shit with all the power we just let them take, that's bad, sure, and we'll strongly consider doing something about it in 6 to 100 years. But every step along the way that led to that happening, and the massive economic incentives which ensure it will happen, that's fine, apparently, and give me some shares in that company while you're at it, because holy shit, do politicians love buying stock in tech monopolies? I'm going insane! I am insane now! To directly quote Bork, and I have to say that because it sounds like a lie if I don't.
It is not the function of a judge to decide what is good for us.
Bork didn't think judges should judge things. That is their job, Robert! This isn't like mean old politicians forcing conservatives to eat their veggies. This is antitrust enforcement, making sure the powerful have some kind of check against using their power with no one to stop them. If the judges don't do that, no one will. And thanks to him, no one did.
Bork's openly pro-monopoly arguments were very popular with big businesses and the politicians they lobbied, or who owned shares in them already, and led to the Supreme Court legalizing many previously illegal practices, and the Department of Justice having less time and money to enforce the laws that remained, paving the way for a golden age of profit for megacorps and the hell we live in today. For his efforts, Bork was rewarded with a position in President Richard Nixon's cabinet as Solicitor General. That's like the third most important lawyer in the country. Unfortunately for him, his spineless greed then caused the destruction of the entire Nixon presidency. The most pivotal moment in Bork's life was probably the Saturday Night Massacre, the turning point in the Watergate scandal where absolutely everyone finally turned on Nixon. Nixon wanted to get rid of the special prosecutor investigating his crimes, so he ordered his attorney general to fire him. The attorney general resigned in protest, so he ordered the deputy attorney general to do it, and he resigned in protest. Even Nixon's own guys were saying, "I won't just fire the people investigating you for crimes, Richard, I quit." With these resignations, Robert Bork became acting attorney general. Nixon ordered him to do it, and he fucking did it. Wanker! Nixon promised Bork he would nominate him for the Supreme Court for this, the highest possible honor a lawman can dream of, so you can understand why a little worm like Bork would go ahead and do it. However, firing the investigator led directly to mass outcry and Nixon's impeachment and resignation, so he was unable to reward Bork for his act of open corruption and evil. A decade and a half later, President Ronald Reagan, a big Bork fan himself, nominated him for the Supreme Court instead. Presumably his track record of doing what the president wanted in exchange for favors seemed useful. Also, he shared his dislike of the Civil Rights Act, abortion, and the separation of church and state.
This psychotic nomination was rejected by the largest margin any Supreme Court nomination has ever been rejected. Suck my dick, Robert Bork. After writing an entire book crying about this rejection, and then later another book slouching towards Gomorrah about the evils of homosexuality, women having access to abortion, violent television, and worst of all, the rap lyrics of Snoop Doggy Dogg, Bork fell into obscurity and died in 2012. Good. Now watch me hit this sick trick shot.
Given its release in 1996, this might be one of the first examples of the now common genre of conservative slop books, complaining about how America's too gay, diverse, and feminist, and we need to fix it with, well, they don't usually call it fascism, but you know. The case for censorship? Okay, that's pretty direct. I wonder why no one wanted this guy on the Supreme Court. Bork saw the future coming. Pandering to insecure boomers is a real moneymaker. Most of the stuff in here could have been written today. Getting mad about sensitivity training? I thought that stuff was relatively new, but no, everyone just copied Bork. Feminism versus facts. New atheist YouTubers thought they were coming up with original shit in 2013, but no, it all first appeared in a far-right Catholic's manifesto. How's it feel to be a useful idiot, Thunderfoot, you stupid bitch? There's a bit where he charts moral decline by listing some pornos he found on the internet. Presumably he watched it all with a disappointed face. Dig this man's hard drives out of his grave immediately, officer. The dilemma of race. They wouldn't try and get away with naming a whole chapter that now. It's nice to go back to the foundational texts. Modern conservative screeds are so wimpy now. Meh, liberals say Jesus wanted us to love each other, and that makes me sad. Bork thinks America needs to be smoten by God as punishment for passing the Civil Rights Act. Step up your game, Lucas Miles. Christ died for your sins, not for your right to have two fucking first names. And I have to circle back here. There's this thing conservative reactionaries do where they complain popular music has become more degenerate in recent years by cherry-picking a song from 50 years ago and one from today. It's so obviously stupid, I feel like it's more commonly used as a joke about people doing that now, like this one with the Beatles. But Bork might actually be patient zero for this in American pop culture. He contrasts a Fred Astaire song with Snoop Dogg as proof popular culture has utterly collapsed. And he takes a potshot at Nine Inch Nails. This man just hates good music. Radical feminists claim there are 5 genders: men, women, lesbians, gays, and bisexuals. They got them all. His books do not discuss any of the actual material problems facing America because he caused them. Bork got what he wanted politically. His views on many aspects of law became mainstream among both parties for decades, but everything was still fucked up for some reason, and he couldn't complain about the system because it was working how he wanted now, so he was reduced to getting mad about pop music. His books describe America's descent into personal profit and pleasure at the expense of society's greater whole, not pausing for a second to think about how he spent his life enabling corporations to do just that. Whether he liked it or not, he was living in Bork's America, and even as he was dying in it, his final days were spent ignorant of the fact he was looking upon his own works in despair. Antitrust law in America has got pretty bad, due in large part to Bork and his protégés, including his son, the creatively named Robert Bork Jr., who pens equally creative articles reusing Daddy's 50-year-old rhetoric and complaining about how attempts to walk back his father's damage would be bad for investors. Not investors, those are the real people! Won't someone please think of BlackRock? Bork's influence is still felt today, even while megacorps are bigger than they've ever been, eating everyone in their industry and charging insane prices. Freaks at the Heritage Foundation are saying, no, you don't get it. According to the guy who did Watergate, mergers make everything more efficient and cheaper. Quick question, what world are you living in, Stephen? Maybe you should get your prescription checked, if you can fucking afford it! We didn't need to wait to find out if Bork's ideas worked. Even at the time, they obviously didn't. During Bork's heyday, one of the biggest monopolies in history, AT&T controlled all American telephones and telegraphs, thus the name. It was the kind of monopoly so bad it was portrayed in political cartoons as a giant grasping octopus, with octopus written on it. They didn't get this literal back then for nothing. AT&T was abusing its patents and market power to crush competition and basically rob its consumers. So no, not good for consumer welfare actually. The United States eventually sued AT&T, and the result was its breakup into 7 smaller companies. The breakup actually happened during Reagan's presidency. Reaganites and Borkheads were screaming about how monopolies were just more efficient and never did bad things, while the biggest monopoly ever was being broken up for doing those things. This didn't give them pause for concern, make them stop and think, oh, maybe the America we're building is bad, and the consequences will last for generations and eventually destroy the world. They saved that sort of concern for their books, and they blamed TV and gay marriage instead. Even though antitrust enforcement was demonstrably important for protecting society from massive corporations, it continued to be stripped of its power, and it was here, in the dying days of American antitrust, that computer software as we know it was born. We're getting back to Adobe soon, I swear. Maybe people didn't know what octopuses looked like back then, so they had to label it. Imagine not being able to just look at an octopus whenever you want. Life used to be so hard back then. Part 4. Big Tech versus Antitrust. So you're a computer or software company at the dawn of the PC revolution, and you've been watching all this happen and taking notes. You want monopoly power because that's how you make the most money, and the guys in charge seem cool with that and have defunded the organizations which would try to stop you, but AT&T just got heptasected for monopolying too hard. The overall message was a bit mixed. Monopolies were allowed, even encouraged, but only so far, and even under the much more relaxed rules of the day, there was still a risk of Uncle Sam stepping in with his big, what's the metaphorical Uncle Sam's footwear? Brogues? I'm gonna go with brogues. Early on, no one in the brand new wiki wild wild west of personal computing knew what would trigger a broguing from the FTC, so companies were a little afraid to test the waters and be made an example of. When Quark was trying to buy Adobe, they claimed they would sell the programs Adobe made which competed with theirs to someone else. This is because they were concerned buying all their competition would be breaking the law. It's interesting to look back on a time when companies had to at least pretend to care about the rules. So around 30 years ago, there was still a line most companies were unwilling to cross. We know that line existed because Microsoft found it when they openly tried to kill their enemies. With a gun. By the time Microsoft realized the internet was the future, there was already a popular web browser, Netscape Navigator, and they were way behind if they wanted to compete, even on their own operating system. But Microsoft wanted the web browser market for themselves. Controlling what people use to access the internet would be putting a big finger in the pie of the online ecosystem, and Billy wanted his thumbs moist with crust. So to crush the competition, they released their browser, Internet Explorer, for free. Netscape and other browsers were products which you had to pay for, and Microsoft had planned to do the same, but controlling the internet was more important than any short-term loss, and they were rich and could afford to make theirs free. Microsoft made deals with computer sellers forcing them not to pre-install any other web browsers on their machines, and would threaten not to put Windows in their stores at all if they also sold competitors or competing web browsers. They also made rival browsers difficult to install and run slower, so they looked worse than they actually were. In meetings, Bill Gates tried to pressure Intel into not supporting software he didn't like Netscape and also Java. Because everyone used Windows, by threatening to make future versions of Windows not work on Intel's chips, he could essentially hold Intel's very existence hostage. One of Intel's vice presidents claimed another Microsoft executive openly told him they were trying to extinguish Netscape and cut off their air supply and keep them from getting off the ground. Microsoft was so brazen about their monopolism, their executives were confessing to crimes in meetings and assuming no one would stop them. This was a textbook case of monopolism. But maybe thanks to the fact they kept telling people they were doing it, it was so obviously criminal the American government actually did something. The resulting court case, satisfyingly titled United States v. Microsoft Corp., had many amazing moments, but the best by far was Bill Gates' depositions. Government lawyers asked him about the many emails where he wrote, "How do we buy or kill Netscape? Mwahaha," while he sweats like a guilty snake and grooms his hair until he's a complete mess and stares at the floor and tries to claim the computer wrote those words on its own.
Who typed in hi? A computer. A computer.
Seriously, all 11 hours are up online. They should play it in schools. He takes 60 entire seconds to answer a question with, "I don't know." It's amazing. It's the broguing of a lifetime. Even our old pal Bobby Bork came out of retirement to consult for Netscape during the lawsuit and called for Microsoft to be broken up. You know how bad a monopoly has to be for Robert Bork to be against it? Microsoft lost the case. The ordered punishment was divestiture. Similar to AT&T, Microsoft had to split into two companies, an operating systems business and an applications business. That way, they could no longer use control of their OS to kill their software's competitors because now they were separate companies entirely. This general reduction in size and power would also make it harder for them to threaten stores and hardware manufacturers. The galaxy would be at peace. So, why don't we live in that beautiful world right now? Why didn't all of that happen? Why are we instead collectively as a species looking at a big pop-up warning us to update to Windows 11 or else, and if you do update, it breaks your fucking hard drive? Microsoft filed an appeal and proposed a settlement where, instead of being punished in any way, they promised to stop doing crimes. 9 of the 20 states involved in the lawsuit disagreed with the settlement on the grounds that it didn't do anything, but the court approved the settlement anyway because judges had spent decades believing monopolies were actually good. And Bill Gates is just a great guy with no skeletons in his closet. We should just let him keep innovating with all that power. Look, the computer wrote those emails, alright? The settlement's terms technically expired in 2007, so I guess crime is legal for Microsoft now. Luckily, they never did anything wrong ever again. And if they did, what are you gonna do? Ask them nicely to stop? Bork killed antitrust enforcement. They're not gonna stop anyone. This makes Bork's cameo appearance in this story really funny, partially because it made his biggest fans in places like the Cato Institute complain he'd lost his touch. All Bork, no bite? That is stone cold. I thought I was being mean making fun of his name. Wait, dogging Microsoft? What? But also because it shows the real-world impact of Bork's theory. For decades, Bork had fought tirelessly to let toddlers carry firearms. Obviously, he was against the toddlers shooting anyone. That should still be a crime. But for the sake of innovation and efficiency, they should still be allowed to have them, just in case. Sure, I'm glad he came out and said something when one of the toddlers shot Netscape, but you're the reason we got into this mess. You don't get to pretend to be shocked this happened. His idea was that when monopolies actually do crimes, there should be punishment for it, but to prevent antitrust from simply attacking successful businesses, the laws should be weakened. Once one of those crimes actually happened, though, antitrust was so weak that there was no punishment. Microsoft got away with it, didn't they? They were too big to be punished, too powerful to be meaningfully opposed by the legal system, and the aggressively pro-big business America Bork had built was happy to let them go back to normal as long as they pinky swore to stop being bad. His ideological descendants were yelling at him for even acknowledging Microsoft were wrong. The corporations who fund places like the Cato Institute are monopolies themselves, or they want to be. They don't want these laws enforced. Bork found himself on the receiving end of the armed toddler industrial complex he helped create. After having his way with the system, what was left of it was unable to do anything about the crimes he said he was against. After removing the teeth from antitrust, he really was all Bork and no bite. Dogging Microsoft. The other big antitrust story concerns, who else? Adobe. Remember when Adobe bought Aldus and I said Aldus Freehand became Adobe Freehand? I actually lied there. Never trust YouTubers. Aldus didn't actually own Freehand. They just distributed it the same way Adobe did at the time with Photoshop. If you zoom in on the Freehand splash screen I'm using to represent the application, you can see above the Aldus copyright there's one for the Altsys Corporation, the company that actually developed it. Altsys and Freehand's users got very loud about Adobe buying Aldus to try to steal or kill Freehand, which at that point was Adobe Illustrator's only real competition. And it was so obviously monopolistic the Federal Trade Commission stepped in. The commission ordered Adobe to cough up their Freehand assets and give control of the application back to Altsys. So Freehand actually escaped the bought and destroyed by Adobe cycle, thanks to the law actually intervening on monopolistic practices. Altsys were a fairly small company who didn't have the same resources for marketing and distribution as Adobe or Aldus had, especially not the abominable marriage of the two, so to stand a chance in the future, they merged with another company. Macromedia. Oh no. The Altsys offices stayed open and kept developing Freehand as part of a union which could, at least for a while, hold its own against the growing monolith. And as part of the case, the FTC explicitly ruled Adobe needed permission before they tried to buy any more illustration software for the next 10 years. 11 years later, Adobe bought Macromedia. So Aldus Freehand did become Adobe Freehand eventually, it just took a bit longer than Adobe would have liked. Adobe claimed it would continue to support Freehand, which was a lie, it was discontinued within 2 years. Users were pissed. A fair few groups and petitions calling for its continuation sprang up, one notable one named the Free Freehand movement. Freehand was really good at what it did, and for many of its users this was Adobe finally succeeding in their long-term plan to kill their app of choice along with the livelihoods of its users. To quote Free Freehand,
"Corporations that buy and bury the products of others just because they are unable to produce a better product do harm to our society. Not only do they act unethically, they also obstruct progress in this country, all in the name of corporate profits."
Freehand was clearly beloved amongst its users, but what I find especially astute about Free Freehand's spokesperson, Christine Steffensen, is her recognition monopolism wasn't just bad because it killed a thing she liked, it was bad for everyone in a much deeper way.
The lack of competition is also not good for users of Adobe Illustrator. The lack of innovation and total price control means Illustrator users are getting a lackluster product with each upgrade and have nowhere else to turn if they are unhappy with the product.
When people lose access to alternatives, if it's something they need to live or work, they're stuck with essentially no choice but to purchase an overpriced or substandard product. With Adobe controlling both softwares, they can do whatever they want, like let them stagnate like they later did with Flash. And users are stuck. Who's going to make a competing illustration software?
software, you. Good luck, buddy. Hope you know your fucking vectors. It's very difficult for new companies to break an existing monopoly. This is especially true in the software space, where applications have to serve increasingly complex needs and expectations. The FTC identified this when they forced Adobe to cough up Freehand in 1994. Illustrator and Freehand are the only two products in that market. Illustrator and Freehand compete for sales to graphics arts professionals and are the only illustration programs which offer features and performance characteristics enabling graphics professionals efficiently and reliably to create and print high-quality illustrations. Entry into the market for professional illustration software would not be timely, likely, or sufficient in its magnitude, character, and scope to deter or counteract anti-competitive effects. In 1994, the Federal Trade Commission's conclusion was crystal clear. Freehand must be kept separate in order for this market to remain competitive. So, where was this attitude when Adobe tried buying them the second time? The purchasing of Macromedia reflected the overall change in government acceptance of monopolism. In the 11 years between Adobe's attempts to buy Freehand in 1994 and 2005, techno-feudalism had become acceptable. Microsoft lost a massive antitrust case, and the punishment was next to nothing. This event clearly signaled to the rest of corporate America the system was fully balked. When this happened, Adobe knew when they tried buying Freehand again, no one would stop them this time. As companies got even more powerful and greedy and legislators gave up on enforcing what little laws were even left, an act which was once decried by the FTC was waved on through 11 years later. This especially stings because this purchase was also how Adobe took Flash hostage. Now that blatant monopolism is completely uncontested, companies are just doing crimes and admitting to them like Microsoft did, because it doesn't matter anymore. Remember when Zuckerberg bought Instagram and admitted he was doing it to trap escaping users back in the Facebook ecosystem? That's a blatantly illegal anti-competitive practice. This email is, and I mean this literally, a confession to a crime? I'm not even joking. Hang on, let's pull up the full emails for a second. We need to unpack how funny this is. This is an exchange with Facebook's chief financial officer, whose, main job is to know this sort of thing is illegal. And it's like he can sense these emails are going to show up in a courtroom one day because he replies very carefully. He asks Mark to clarify in detail why he wants to buy Instagram and gives a list of possible reasons. Reason 1 is to neutralize a competitor, which is a crime, and he gives a paragraph explaining why that's a bad idea. He then lists 2 better reasons and offers to discuss further. He's essentially going, "It sounds like you're confessing to a crime. Would you like to rephrase that?" And Mark replies, "No, I'm malicious and stupid. Reason 1 all the way. Let's neutralize our competition with money. It's crime time, baby." But then, right, Mark must have thought for a few more minutes and realized what he'd just said. Or maybe the CFO got him on the phone and explained it to him, because 45 minutes later, Mark sent another email saying, "I didn't mean to imply we'd be buying them to prevent them competing with us." You didn't imply it, Mark. You said it. It's like he remembered he was not supposed to say it out loud and tried to go back and change his answer. So it's clear Zuckerberg had some concern someone might eventually enforce the law, but he still did it, so not super concerned. And he was right not to be. The Obama administration did not contest the acquisitions of Instagram or WhatsApp because they wanted to be seen supporting the tech sector and helping big American companies get even bigger. In 2020, when the Biden administration finally decided to take Facebook to court over all the insane shit they've done, a decade too late, when they brought up these emails, Zuckerberg correctly pointed out they had those 10 years ago and voted to do nothing.
Mergers and acquisitions that buy off potential competitive threats violate the antitrust laws. In your own words, you purchased Instagram to neutralize a competitive threat.
Well, Congressman, I think the FTC had all of these documents and reviewed this and unanimously voted at the time not to challenge the acquisition.
What the fuck were you even doing for those 8 years, Obama? Stop making jokes with him on stage. Get him. Rip his arms off. What are you doing? Zuckerberg is maybe my favorite clown on this issue, because since everything he says leaks, we have so many funny examples of him just admitting it. Like in one email, he straight up tells his employees the reason he's worried about Google is because they can just buy any competitive startups. He's saving Google for later, obviously. But speaking of paper trails, an awful lot of companies just admit to their shareholders they're buying their competition instead of competing with them. You see, public companies have to file documents about what the company is doing and the various risks and challenges they expect to face in the future. This is the only real place where you can expect a company to be completely open and honest, because they have a financial obligation to tell the truth to their shareholders. And if you lie to those people, they sue you and you go to prison. Investors matter more than normal people, remember, so they actually enforce those laws. A company's 10K and 10Q forms are the closest you can get to the horse's mouth.
Ugh. Anyway, one of the main challenges a company brings up in its risk assessments is, of course, competition. Other companies that do what you do pose the biggest threat to your business, so competition is a part of basically every company's analysis of how they're doing. In Adobe's 2004 report, they have a 3.5-page section covering their competition, and Macromedia and its products come up 7 times. 7 times in 3.5 pages! Quark, who almost bought them once, come up way less. Adobe considered Macromedia their main competitor. By Adobe's 2005 report, Adobe has bought Macromedia. I'm not the one saying Adobe is buying out their competition. Adobe is saying it in their reports. Their competition section is just their future shopping list. The 2005 filings competition section deals with all the competitors with our Macromedia products, giving some readers whiplash. Weren't they our competitors last year? We just bought them? Isn't that illegal? Not anymore, I guess. Buying your enemies isn't the only way anti-competitive practices have shaped the tech industry. The other big method involves undercutting the competition using means no one else has access to. Microsoft did this when they gave Internet Explorer away for free. Obviously, not many companies can afford to sell their products for nothing, so those guys went bankrupt. Microsoft won the first browser war while having the worst browser by using the cheat code known as having a lot of money. Other companies have used the infinite money trick as well, but here's a twist: you don't even need to get your money from prior success making products people like. You could just find some investors with a couple dozen billion dollars to spare. Companies like Uber or WeWork operate at a loss for years and years. Here's Uber losing $160 million in the first half of 2014. That's not profitable. Why would anyone invest in this? Well, because they understand what's going on here. Making something people want to use because it's good is difficult. It's much easier to just be the last man standing. You can do this by undercutting your competition and operating at a loss using investor money to keep yourself afloat until everyone else goes out of business or lets you buy them. Then, once you're the only option, you can gouge the prices as much as you like and your investors make infinite money forever. This doesn't always work. WeWork never turned a profit, and when the investors realized it was unrelatedly run by crazy people, they went bankrupt. But by 2023, 14 years into its operation, Uber finally became profitable. After gaining enough market share, they could start charging more, paying drivers less, and expect little competition. In 2015, the Wall Street Journal printed an article about Uber being valued at over $50 billion, and briefly mentions that's in spite of how, they're actually losing money, explaining the company hopes to build enough loyalty that it can charge customers more and pay drivers less. Build loyalty here is a euphemism for kill taxi services. Once taxis are dead and people without cars need Uber to get around America's car-centric nightmare infrastructure, they will start looting users and treating drivers even more like slaves. And that's what ended up happening, isn't it? But even this guarded description of the business model was a bit too risky for the Wall Street Journal to admit. They either got sent a legal threat or made an editorial decision to avoid one, because in the online version of this article, the wording was changed. Now it just says the company plans to eventually become profitable by, getting more customers, which doesn't even make sense. Uber was losing money, and as they grew, the amount of money they were losing went up. The only way this business model ever makes sense is if you're planning on jacking up the price once people have no choice. But I wouldn't want to make Uber mad either. I mean, they have billions of dollars to fight you with, despite not actually making any money. The Wall Street Journal needs to leave the hard-hitting criticism to the YouTubers. That's my job now. I didn't expect the future of democracy to fall on my head. Tom Nicholas just made a video about how Uber have finally come to his little town, and they're doing the whole thing in fast forward right now, charging users next to nothing to kill the local taxi services and paying drivers more than they were charging users to get them working, and then once all the competition is dead, they'll gouge everyone and feast on the profits. Where's the consumer welfare here, Robert?
One of the most annoying things about late-stage capitalism is you don't even get the things you were supposed to. Like, a free market. We were promised a free market. It was the only thing we were promised. We didn't get anything else, but we don't even get that. Because midway through the game, surprise twist, the company with the most money can just buy or kill everyone else and then turn around and charge you whatever they want because there are no alternatives left. I want my healthy competition. I'm not asking, America. Put the free market in the bag or we're gonna have some fucking trouble. Wow, this place is really something. It even has a jail with beds in it. You can stay the night in here. Temecula, book now. I hope they give me a discount for this. The monopolization model is so accepted it takes a lot to draw the ire of legislators. Adobe are now so big their acquisitions are finally getting noticed again. Figma is a collaborative design tool which competes with Adobe in several key industries. In 2023, Adobe tried to buy them for $20 billion, the entire GDP of Jamaica. But after extremely mild pressure from British and European courts, they changed their minds and gave up, and had to pay $1 billion termination fee, the entire GDP of Samoa, for wasting Figma's time. Adobe got so scared someone might have remembered what laws there are and gave up. They know they're the bad guys doing something wrong in all this. As soon as they thought someone noticed, they threw away $1 billion to avoid getting legislated. You can throw away that much money and you've got influencers shooting your commercials in an Airbnb. Oh, you're lucky I'm in here, buddy. Adobe and the rest of big tech are actively trying to keep buying companies and growing bigger than entire countries, and they're not doing it so they can make better products that cost less. The products keep getting worse and costing more. They haven't captured efficiency gains and passed them on to the consumer. They've captured markets and are now holding them hostage, the way pro-monopoly Republicans claimed doesn't happen. Looks like they made a mistake, huh? We now go live to Robert Bork for his rebuttal. Compelling stuff. So now, almost every major digital tool is concentrated in the hands of Adobe, a company just like Adobe, or a company just like Adobe who got bought by Adobe. So now we get to find out in real time what happens when a tech company has a monopoly over their market. We get to see for ourselves why AT&T got broken up. Yippee! Wait, someone's coming. Hello? Ugh. Cat?
I'm Buzz Lightyear. I'm here to rescue you.
You know, when I said bring a Toy Story costume, I assumed the context was clear.
What's he say? To infinity and beyond.
Have any of my videos passed the Bechdel test?
Do you want me to rescue you or not?
You know what? Yeah, that would be nice. I think there's some keys back there. You could just...
I don't think it's locked.
Yeah, but as a leftist, I enjoy being trapped in a cage of my own making. Speaking of which, fuck it, let's play Monopoly. You know Monopoly? Not the actual thing, the game. You ever wondered why it's kind of boring and not that fun at all? That's because it was invented by a socialist. Elizabeth Magie was a writer, engineer, inventor, feminist, and political activist who invented the game to demonstrate the effects of monopolism. Losing because the other players lucked out early on isn't fun, but it's also how the world works. You have some fat stacks, Rachel. My God.
Yeah.
Being crushed in a comically evil fashion by your competition in game form, where you get to think about what it says about our economy without becoming bankrupt in real life, or using an early success to dominate the board for all 8 agonizing hours it takes to finish, becomes kind of interesting when you realize that's the point. Typical. You make a game to teach people about society, and everyone criticizes it because it's bad game design. It's art, you're not supposed to like it. But Lizzie didn't call her game Monopoly. No, that was the name of a later version heavily inspired by her idea, i.e. stolen. Her original version had a much more comically evil name. She called it The Landlord's Game.